sun. I don't like you to concentrate on the problem. If there's head walls that are at the end, the head wall is, you have a pipe coming into the stream, and there's usually a head wall that fits through the pipe, kind of looks like that. If that's falling down, that water now is cutting that channel and causing sediment. They want the head wall fixed. If you have a bank that's severely eroded, as you saw here, we have the sanitary manholes exposed. They want that fixed. They want that armored some type. You build the bank there and you create a new bank in that area to protect that infrastructure. As you fix your problems, you're reducing your sediment loading in the channel over time. This is a very expensive process, both permitting wise and to get it done for contracting. Years ago, we had the Mosquito Commission. They were allowed to come in, clear trees, clear brush out, clear sediment out. Sediment would get stacked somewhere in a yard, and contractors would take it. It doesn't work like that anymore. Now, they don't want you cutting trees down because this is a Category 1 water. So just in case everybody here don't know, if you live on the brook, from the top of the bank out 300 feet on both sides is the state of New Jersey's riparian buffer. You're not supposed to cut any woody vegetation. So if you plan on cutting trees in your backyard, there is a permit by rule within the regulations that allows you to do that. You can be fined if you cut stuff you're not supposed to be cutting down from the state, and they will come out after you for it. That's part of the protection of the waterway. By putting these buffers on a Category 1 water, it protects a lot of the stuff washing into the channel and supposed to upgrade the water quality. That's the reason for the large riparian buffer. So when we do a project and we're doing a bank stabilization, they count every tree we cut, and we have to justify the reason why we're cutting that tree. And for every one we cut, we have to put 3 back. So what ends up happening when we get done with a restoration project, it looks like we put a forest in between the understory of shrubs and bushes and then the overstory of trees. And we do it, but it's costly. You know, it takes a lot of money to put this in, and the state will offer grants when you have some of these larger storms. The USDA will give money. It's limited, but they'll give money. It's for the whole state. And DEP under a 319 program will give you some money, but it has to qualify. And they usually go for, of course, you can imagine, they go for the streams that are more out in Hunterdon County and the rural areas that, you know, don't have much development, and they get the bigger bang for their buck because they're able to do more. And there's a lot of, you know, trout production waters out there. So they kind of put the money in a caste system. Okay, we're going to take care of these areas first, but you could apply for it. Okay. With the Muskosink, we did the drone study. We flew it, the stream, to see what was happening. And there's some down trees that need to be taken care of. It's unfortunate that we don't have the availability of the Mosquito Commission like we used to have in Bergen County. They used to be able to come through and clear these things out. And they had long reach machines. I don't know if you saw the machines with a big stick on them, and they used to go grab them and pull everything out of the stream. They're really not available to do that anymore. They'll do it, but they're taking care of the whole county. I think they have 2 people. They had a death from somebody cutting a tree. I think it was about 5 years now, and cutting a tree in the channel, and the person was crushed by the tree. And after that, they kind of, you know, stopped. They'll cut it, they'll pull it to the side, and then it's up to you to go take it out. So there is some down trees in the study we saw. We noted this all in the report. There was bank erosion. We noted where the specific bank erosion was that needed to be addressed. And we presented that in the report to the council. And that's it. That's the long and short of it. So I'll take any questions you would like.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I just want everyone to hear on TV and on the screen. So I'm gonna come around and pass the microphone, I guess, around to the people who want to ask questions.
That's right. Come on, sit down.
Are you sure
It's gonna just record its own thing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So when you say that the Mosquito Commission is now down to 2 people and it resulted, part of it is maybe because it resulted in a death, and you say that now we have to take the trees out? Who
No,
is
no, no,
we?
no, no. We is the township.
The
Not-
township.
yeah, Not
So
as,
it's not
no, no,
the
no.
community
No.
surrounding
No.
the water, okay. So can we get that done then? What's preventing that from being done?
Well, that's why I believe the mayor commissioned us to do the drone study, to come up with what is the problem with the pond, what do we need to do to resolve it? And we spelled out whether or not you need permits, because some trees you need permits, some trees you don't. So we spelled it out in here by section, what you need to do and what was covered under what they call a permit by rule. That means you have an automatic permit from the state, you just can't go beyond the boundaries of what that is. So you can go in there, you can go in there with a piece of equipment, but you can't disturb the vegetation, if that makes sense to you. So you can get as close as you can, you put a chain or a rope on it, and you can pull it out. You can cut it up to log size, pull it out, you can cut it up to firewood size, pull it up. So now, I mean, I don't know if the DPW has that kind of forces here to do that, but they'll have like other companies, like Montvale had Downs Tree Service come in, and they did sections of the channel for them. And that's what municipalities do, they fund that, and they go after it. So I guess that's why we commissioned that. Then we were asked, what else needs to be done? And we prioritized where the stabilization needs to be done, and we found the exposed manholes at the time. We didn't know if Township of Washington owned them, they could have been VC ways. So we had to get confirmation that it wasn't Township of Washington. The mayor instructed us to see what we could do.
Frank, can you just talk more into that microphone?
Wait,
Yeah.
how about
Yeah,
I do
let's
this?
turn it around.
I'll
Can
just
it
hold
turn?
No.
No.
How about you do this? How about you do this? And if you stand here. And use this as
There,
your
you can stand
platform.
behind it.
Hello?
Much
There you go.
better.
There you go.
The,
Much better.
Thank you.
I've already spoke with the DP and told them we have an emergency situation for this. So we're in the process right now, putting a proposal together to get this taken care of. And that would be building the bank back and protecting and armoring that sanitary sewer line and manhole.
And then what about the down? And then what about the trees that you said the studies show that there are trees down that need
Yes.
to be removed, so that
Yes.
would be part of the equation.
Part of the equation is we've instructed them, they'll see if they want to remove them, the township can come in and take care of that. That you would have to speak to the council about.
And then, and what about all the debris that's coming into the lake?
You're never going to stop. Unfortunately, when you have big impoundments of water like lakes and you have a dam, and you probably have a trash rack on that dam, I suspect, yes? 2 trash racks, okay. The purpose of that is because you're always going to get trash coming down. And it's not only the trash from Washington Township. The problem you have is New York is not far away when it comes to that waterway also. In New Jersey, at least, in New Jersey, the township is required under the MS4, the Municipal Stormwater Law, to change the grates in the street so you can't get bottles and all the floatables coming down into the waterway anymore. New York doesn't have that. So you're going to get all that trash coming from upstream regardless. That's never going to stop until they make some changes in their regulations. Plus the fact, these smaller branches and all that other stuff that comes down that you see that collects, don't forget a lot of people are to blame too. I mean, a lot of people have their landscapers blow everything to the side of the stream. They throw branches, they cut the trees, they stack the branches on the banks. We see it all the time. In fact, we've had many people cited for that. As we were doing the stream cleanings, we've had the DP come up and cite them for doing stuff like that. So you're never going to stop the debris from coming down into an impoundment of water that has a dam structure on it. That's why you have a trash rack. And in fact, what is that? Do you know, anybody know? Do you know if it's a class 2 dam? Do you know what class that dam is? It's a class 2 or 3? Anybody know? Okay. Class 2, 3, and class 1. It's not a class 1 dam. It doesn't impound it. Probably class 2 or 3. You're required to have an operation and maintenance manual. Does anybody here maintain?
We get inspections or every 2 years.
4 years, it's 2 years for informal,
you-
4 years for formal. Okay?
I'm sorry, just a reminder, I know it's going to be a little adjusting, but in order to speak, you must have the microphone because they're not going to hear you at home.
Well,
And I'm just going back and forth with WCTV. So just hold your questions like Oprah. We're going to do it like an Oprah Winfrey show. Okay.
the reason why I was asking that question is because in there you have, every time you have an event, you should be filling out a form. Somebody should be in charge other than having an engineer come out there that's in charge of keeping that trash rack clean and free of debris. It's probably in the report. It gives a person, there's a whole, I do these studies, that's why. And that's what you need to do. You have to maintain your structure. When you build an impoundment, the state says, okay, here's the impoundment. Now you're responsible for it. Now, I don't know whether you have an association or there's a single owner on this dam. I mean, I don't. Association.
Mike, the mic.
Okay. So then you probably have somebody who's named as the responsible person to maintain the trash rack?
Maintain the trash rack?
Yes.
Well, when we get debris from the brook, I just want to show you a few photos.
Yep, that's fine.
And you mentioned like sticks. It's not sticks. This was about 2 weeks ago. I will show you. That's just a very small portion of what we pulled out.
Yeah, and a lot of this, you see, a lot of this here, it's been dead for a while.
Yeah.
And what happens is.
So it's trees coming down, not just sticks.
Look at a lot of that. A lot of that is snapped off.
Frank, can you just grab the microphone? I am so sorry we don't have more than one.
A lot of that you'll see is decayed and old snapped off stuff. You don't see the real trees coming in there. That is a lot of debris that I maintain 2 dams. So one for Franklin Lakes, it's North Haledon, and we have the same problem of stuff coming down into that. And we have 75 acres of water. I don't know how big your lake is.
About 28 acres.
20, yeah. Well, this is 75. And we have, what I do is I have a fireboat actually go out and go along the whole bank, because ours is wooded all the way around, and pick up all the wood and stuff as much as they can. They put it in and gather it all out, especially when I know storms are coming. Unfortunately, you're an on-stream pond. That's what we call it. And so is Franklin Lake. It's on stream with Molly and Brook. So we have the same problem with stuff coming down. The advantage that we have over what you have is we go through a swamp first. So a lot of the stuff gets caught up in the swamp and then eventually makes its way down. You have a straight shot because you have the Muskwa St. Brook and that thing, you have a big floodplain here. Plus, I believe you have the reservoir from Veolia that opens up their gates too. I believe they let water out too, up above in Tapan,
Above us?
way above, right?
I don't think so.
No. They don't get this from Tapan. Is that just Pascack, John?
It's from Nika.
Oh,
Okay.
Mike.
Okay, because I know we've talked about that with Veolia and Old Tapan Lake.
So a few questions. With all this debris that comes down
Yep.
consistently, who is ultimately responsible for the debris that winds up, well, who's responsible for the maintenance of the brook in town from where it meets the mouth of the river and where it meets, I would say, I guess, Woodcliff Lake, just in township? Who is ultimately responsible for the cleanup of the brook?
You don't want to hear this. Property owners.
The property owners.
Your property, if when we used to do the street cleanups, we couldn't go with the mosquito commission unless we had property owners' permission. Because if you look on your survey, a lot of you own to the center of the brook or to the top of the bank, and then the water course. But a lot of times you own to the center of the brook. So you have to go back on your survey and take a look. Because I'm running into that right now in Closter, where we had to get all property owners' permission to go in there to stabilize banks.
So even though on the tax map, I can't read it without my glasses, but there is easements along
Right.
the whole brook.
Right? It's an easement to allow water to pass. If you tried to dam the brook up, say, I own it, and you were trying to put an obstruction across that brook, you would be precluded from doing that because there's easements that allow that water to pass, and there's state requirements that allow that water to pass. You would be obstructing the state open water.
So if a tree is down behind Mrs. Smith's house, who's by the brook, it's Mrs. Smith's
If it's on Miss,
responsibility
if it's Mrs. Smith's
to
property.
take that tree out of the brook.
Yes.
So the whole brook, the town has zero maintenance, nothing.
Nope. And I went through this in the borough of Ordell. Some municipalities take the position that they don't want, they'll go in and they'll get those trees out of there because it's tough for homeowners to do that. And they don't want to see they can call it an impedance to flow. And a lot of times you'll see they used to go in and just cut both sides and push it to the side, the trees, to allow the water to continue to flow. But when it came to removing it, that's the owner's responsibility. They would throw it up. No different than if you have a tree at your house. It falls down, it lands on your neighbor, you cut it at the property line. The piece that's on that side is your neighbor has to get rid of it. Even though it's your tree on your property, the piece falls on there. I just had that happen to me. Piece that falls onto them is their problem.
So all this debris coming down, you're saying it's the people that live on the brook, it's their responsibility.
I know you don't want to hear that, but that's
And what about?
Because
We want to hear the truth.
That's-
Tell us what's going on.
That's the truth. The truth of it is that different municipalities handle it different ways. I know Washington Township, Westwood, all of them, they for years have been going after, had the mosquito commission taking a lot of these fallen and dead trees out of this brook. Because it causes problems. It causes roads to flood. It causes all the debris to block under bridges. And you have a lot of problems when it starts hitting up against bridges. So they have, they want to get that out of there. Some towns take the position, let it go. We'll deal with it when we deal with it. In fact, you'll see in the Ordell Reservoir, they put big booms up and they take, I don't know how many dumpsters of trash out a month.
And who does that?
Borough of actually Veolia,
I'm sorry?
Veolia, the water company.
So what you're saying.
Mike, you need the mic, hang on.
I think we should have them.
So what you're saying then is if I have trees that are within 300 feet of the water, I need a permit to take the tree down or do anything to the tree. If I have a tree that's dying and it's going to be a hazard in the next storm, no one's going to tell me I need to take that tree down. I have to initiate that. So why isn't there some kind of inspection committee that's going around to make sure that for the good of the whole, that the individuals are doing what they're supposed to do?
Because you would have a lot of people screaming and yelling. Because some people, if you come up to somebody, if you would come to me and say, oh, you have to cut your tree down. And I don't think there's anything wrong with my tree, or I like that tree, then we're going to start, it's going to be a problem. And that happens a lot also.
But
I mean-
it's a detriment to the community. So what if it's a tree that's not on the water? What if it's a tree that's arcing over a street that the limb can fall and kill someone? Okay, take it down. You're being cited for a hazardous tree. I don't understand the difference.
The difference is if the tree's on private property, a lot of trees that you talk about hanging over the water, some of them, that are leaning 30%, the state will allow you to come in and consider it dangerous, or it could be an impedance to flow. You can take that tree down. They have what's they call permit by rule. There's very specific things in the permit by rule that allows you to do tree removal. They call it maintenance. Okay, tree maintenance.
But what I'm saying in my example, if my neighbor has a tree,
Mhm.
whether it's over the water or it's over the street, that's a danger to the community, I would have to, as an individual, make a complaint to someone to get them cited to take the tree down.
I think you have a tree person in town. You do, right? Do you have a tree?
We have the DPW. We don't have a specific tree. No.
Some towns have shade tree commissions, and they will go out and cite them. If you don't have a shade tree commission.
The code inspector comes around. Cut up.
What is that? Obviously it's a phone, but why are they calling? No idea. Hang on just one second.
Inspector for the
Hang on.
town.
Just 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Bizarre.
The code inspector comes to your house,
Okay.
because it just happened to my sister who lives on Woodfield. Somebody came by and said they think the tree is dead, that's on the front of her property, and they cited her, and she only has a certain amount of time to get the tree down. So why couldn't that be what you're saying, the same in your backyard? If
Can I
it's
answer that?
over a-
I think that most likely that was prompted by a phone call from a resident's concern, most likely.
Right, but
yeah,
if you are walking around the lake and you see,
One at a time.
so if you're walking around the lake and you see somebody's tree that looks like it's dead and it's over the lake, then you can call the town and they can come out and cite that person, correct?
That's a legal question.
Well, if it's a violation, it can be cited.
Right.
But, I mean,
You gotta go
In your, yeah, Mike, you too.
of course, you gotta remember, I mean, you also have to remember that the resources that the town of Washington has. It doesn't have anybody, the kind of resources to go and police every location in town, every street in town, every park in town, every lake in town, every stream in town. Just not enough resources for people to pay them time-wise to go out and find all of these trees. So it really is a reactive situation. And I guess what happened is what you illustrated, where somebody complained, then the code enforcement official would go out
Right,
and he would
so-
do his job.
Right, so
Yeah,
what I'm saying
yeah,
is if
right.
you see it in somebody's backyard, it's the same thing as if it's in their front yard.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
so you can
right.
call the town and they can go and they can cite those.
if
Individuals.
it's a condition that requires it. There's also the question of whether a tree is falling down. Is it a healthy tree that's leaning over? I mean, I've been involved in enough.
It
of
would
these
have to
things
be,
with
you'd have to
trees.
get an
Yeah,
arborist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I have another comment too. I'm sorry. So in light of the recent developments with the hurricane and with this last storm, the assessment that's been done by a professional engineer who has 40 years' experience, couldn't a committee be developed to assess? I mean, we're not talking about hundreds and thousands of miles of property. We're just talking about our community here. Couldn't a team go out and assess what the potential damaging trees and foliage is that should be addressed?
When we did the drone study, we tried to make it as comprehensive as we can. We did it by area. We took photographs of the trees that needed to be taken down or were down and removed. So we have the document, and we submitted that to the township. So it's a start. It's a start to.
Now what now?
Well, now the township is putting the first phase of it in place and taking care of, following the report and taking care of the worst portion of it is the sanitary.
So
the
the
ex-
township agrees with your report and therefore is going to take steps.
Use the mic, please. I'm so sorry. Say that one more time so they can hear you.
So what I'm just kind of verifying, township has your report, township agrees with your report, so now now it's in their hands to do something about it?
You speak to them.
So I'm going to defer to the administration because
Yes, but none of this is cheap, unfortunately.
No.
And none of it was budgeted for this year. So we're looking in to see if we can do some emergency appropriations to get this off the ground, especially the sanitary sewer lines. So yes, we agree with the report in general. There may be a few things that we don't, but we'll work with Boswell on that. But yeah, it takes money to get these things done. And, like I said, it wasn't budgeted for in the beginning of the year because we didn't know that the drone study was going to find all of these things. So like I said, emergency appropriation money, we're going to do the best we can to get it done under the financial constraints of the township.
That sounds logical, but we're still living with the results of it. When can we expect a timeframe? When can we expect something to, the wheels start moving?
As Mr. Rossi said, Boswell is preparing us an estimate to get the first part of it done. So as soon as we have that, we'll see what financial resources it will take and try and gather the money together from as many sources as we can.
Because it is the responsibility of the township, isn't it, is it not, to assure that we are safe and we are not being hit by debris and stuff that's coming down on our properties and into our homes?
I defer to what Mr. Rossi said earlier about debris coming down the stream.
The debris, you're not going to be, you can control that to a limit. You know, we've had these storms that have been crazy lately, and they pushed a lot of these trees over. And, you know, you also have a lot of the trees dying because of different things, ash trees because of the borer. Now you have the lantern flies coming in and killing other trees. So we have that also affecting the forest and the trees along the stream, plus the fact these storms that are causing high erosion, that are causing the undercut of the roots. And so it's happening a lot faster than it did in the past. So
It's
to
not going to stop.
it's going to reach a point where a lot of the trees are going to be down. You're going to look for second generation growth because you'll see a lot of the bigger trees now are falling. It's just it's that nature. That's what's happening. So
Isn't it something we could do to shore up the creek or whatever?
like I said in the beginning of this, and we recommend in here certain areas that need to be stabilized. But when you're talking about doing stabilization projects, just to give you a rough idea, you know, you do a project that's 500 feet. By the time you do the stone retaining walls and stuff, you're looking at anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 just for 500 feet, linear feet. And you know, it's very difficult in New Jersey with the regulatory process because they make you jump through hoops to be able to do this, especially when you're in a Category 1 water. You know, the Muscatine is a Category 1 water. So they really tie your hands, and you really have to justify doing what you're doing. And, you know, you have to hit the worst areas first, the areas that are causing the most problem. Getting the trees out, the first recommendation was to get all the trees out.
This is step number one.
That's step number one. However,
Number two is?
what took place of step number one was the sanitary when we found that. And we confirmed it did belong to Washington Township. So now that's number one. And part of that would be a section of stream cleaning downstream of the lake that would be cleaned. So we take that material and use it to fill behind the walls that we'd have to construct for the sanitary to protect that. So that would be the backfill that we would use that came from there, put it back in there and fix that area up. So you're kind of getting double bang for your money. You're cleaning this section out and you're rebuilding this section here. So you're building about, I think it's roughly almost 200 and something feet of stuff to protect the sanitary while you're cleaning 400 feet of channel, taking a shoal out. So you're cleaning this section and you're building that section. So you're getting about 700 feet of restoration work. And now you will reevaluate at that time. And then you have to go after the trees, start getting the fallen and dead trees out of there. The big ones. I'm not talking about branches. I'm talking about big life-size trees and taking them out of the floodplain.
So can you educate me on and I'm sorry if everybody knows this and I don't know, but can you educate me on the traps? Because I feel like our homes are on the trap. That everything is getting stuck in our lake right by our homes. So where's the trap ahead of that? That's supposed to be filtering this.
You mean the
debris?
trash racks?
Yes.
The trash racks are on the dam structure. They protect, they allow the water, as you got that spillway where the water comes over, okay?
On the lake, right?
On the lake,
But
there's,
before, as it comes down from the
no.
top.
Years ago, what they would do is if a lake association, they would build what they call forebays. But that, again, that belongs to the lake, and that has to be put in when you're doing the lake. And what a forebay does, it allows the water to come in the first section of the lake, and it takes all of the heavy silts and stuff, sediments. Okay? It doesn't do, the trash is going to float. You're not going to stop it. It's going to keep going to the trash rack. But you would accumulate some sediment, and you can clean the forebay out every so many years. And that's how you would maintain that lake. But it'd have to be designed for a forebay. You know, and it would be, again, part of the lake association if it's a private lake.
Okay. Lost my train of thought here. I'm going to try to get back. Let's go back to this sanitary sewer line.
Yeah.
Because I pointed this out 2 years ago in my presentation to the council, which is this right here.
That's it.
So why did it take 2 years in your drone study to show this to our mayor when he knew this 2 years ago? What would happen if That failed.
Big problem.
Yeah, major problem.
In the mic, please, Mr. Rossi.
This was pointed out 2 years ago, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
So why is it being pointed out now?
I can't answer that.
Why can't this be installed?
That could be, but that's would be installed in the lake.
So what if we put this in where the lake comes down to the mouth, where it's private meets the brook? And then we put this in. So all the trash is going to be on the brookside property, and it's going to be their problem now.
That's, again,
What's stopping us from doing this?
you could put that in, but that's going to be your responsibility to clean it.
It is.
Same thing with Oradell Reservoir does it. They have to clean it. PVSC, they have a boom out. They have to clean it. It's the owner's responsibility.
So really what we're talking about here is that nothing can be done. Zero.
What'll end up happening is you have to maintain your trash rack. That's the only thing.
Well, that's what we've been doing, but we just,
Back up.
it's,
Back up into the trash bag.
it's extremely unfair that we represent 267 households that all pay dues into the lake. Okay. It's like somebody having a pool and it's nice and clean and crystal clear, and they wake up the next day because of a storm and it washed in, and it looked like that picture I just showed you. And then you got to clean it up, and you clean it up, and then 2 weeks later it happens again. And then it's a constant, battle of all this debris. People's homes are flooding because of this, because it comes down, it blocks the dam, water has no place to go, so then it's going over to the other dam.
Yep.
And it's causing flooding. And then we're responsible to pay and clean up. So
Unfortunately,
nothing can be done?
that's what happens when you put a dam on a brook. I mean, I just did this with Highlands Lake a couple of years ago. They were having the same problem. And they decided they installed a different kind of system. They didn't like the drainage coming down into their lake. So they spent a tremendous amount of money, and we put this sediment collector in. So we filter all the sediment coming off of the roads into their lake, and they paid for it. They were like, we don't want dirty water coming into our lake. And they have the same situation that you do, not as maybe as much, but every lake I've been by, every on-stream pond or lake that I've dealt with, we're always cleaning trash racks. We have DPWs going out, where they're not private owned lakes, like a Hill and Reservoir, it's not a private owned, going out all the time, once a week, cleaning, and they're collecting a ton of debris. It's just
I
the
understand
nature of the.
So it's not just the debris, but it's the amount of sediment that's coming down too. I mean, and I'm sure you've seen that with the drone. Our north end of the lake looks like this.
Yeah.
And that's clearly all the sediment that came from the banks of the river.
Right, but what also ends up happening is after it leaves your lake, there's still sediment. And there's the yellow deposits from the sediment coming out of the lake that we're going to use to fill back in.
You're talking about
This is
south of our lake. Yeah.
So,
But that sediment from the
From the lake.
north of the lake is not coming down into the lake and then down 30 feet.
oh,
and then
sure
working
it
its
is.
way
It
back
doesn't
up
go
over
down
top of
30
the
feet.
dam.
Doesn't go down 30 feet. It stays suspended in those rushing waters coming in. You see that rushing water coming down in that one section of the lake, and you have suspended sediment in that water. And that water,
Yeah, pass him the mic. He's going to pass you the mic.
Sorry.
Has anyone noticed the amount of erosion by the library? That's where it's going downstream. That's after the lake.
you get it everywhere, remember, but I'm
The
saying.
erosion by
it's
the
still-
library is atrocious.
Right. Your
And that's
lake,
what's causing all that erosion going downstream from the lake. It's not, there may be some floating sediment in the water, but the stream by the library is being washed away. And
You're
there's been
getting-
nothing done there. The trees fall into the library. and still haven't addressed the embankment.
You know, there is a normal life cycle to lakes too.
Just
You know,
one
every
person.
so many years, a lake needs to be dredged. So it's about done with its life. They're usually 30 to 40 years.
So with the sediment that's obviously comes down
Yep.
from all the eroding banks, which
Yep.
you pointed out in your study,
Yep.
which is filling in the north end. If it flows over to dams, that's great, that's fine. You did mention that when you rebuild the banks of the stream, that you need the fill in order to backfill. So it's pretty clear, right, that the sediment in our north end of the lake that's filling in is coming from upstream. Yes?
Here's the rub. I know where you're going with this. Here's the rub, and it would be great. It's private property.
That wasn't my question.
No.
My question was.
I know it's not your
sediment
question.
In the north end
Right.
comes from the brook upstream.
Okay.
Yes?
That's what you're saying. Okay. It's got to come from somewhere. It could come from the
Is it a
north.
yes or a no?
It's got to come from the upstream. Come from upstream. Yes.
So it comes from upstream.
Yes.
We're not putting it there.
Right.
Okay. So we're getting constantly dumped on
Yep.
into the lake. Our lake acts as flood control for people downstream and upstream. Our dams are commissioned by the state. They tell us what to
Right.
do with them, to open them, whatever. But our lake acts as flood control.
Do you open that? Do you
No,
open?
we don't. Unless
Okay.
we're
Because
told.
I didn't think so.
Unless
Okay.
we're told to.
Okay.
So the north end is filling in.
Mhm.
It's not from us. It's from the brook. So you're saying that we are responsible
It's
to
private
remove
property.
that sediment?
It's private property.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a scenario that I said to the mayor. I said, so a DPW truck is filled up with sediment, drive down the street, accidentally tips over. Part of it's in the street, part of it's on the front lawn of somebody. What would the town do? Would you clean that person's front lawn? Or would you leave it on the front lawn and just clean up the part on the street? Anybody?
No, you're absolutely
Same
right. That
scenario.
scenario.
I'm having a hard time hearing because Frank is kind of in between us, and so
No, you would-
I'm having a hard time
So a
hearing.
DPW truck is filled with,
We would absolutely clean up their property.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
thank you.
I don't think anyone here should be remaining quiet on that. That's obvious.
Can you repeat the question though? Because I couldn't hear it.
A scenario of what's happening in the lake, how it's coming down from someplace else and filling in our lake, is that if you had a DPW truck filled with debris, driving down the street in town, tipped over, all the debris spilled out, part of it on your street, part of it on somebody's front lawn. Would you just clean up the street and leave everything on somebody's front lawn?
I don't know that we can make an apples to apples correlation to that because as we all know, waterways are treated much differently than real property.
I
mean,
was
Frank,
just about
you-
to say.
you-
the
you correct me if
DPW
I'm wrong.
Excuse me, the DPW truck belongs to the town.
Right.
The brook does not belong to the town. It's our truck, our driver, they've turned over, and you're giving the example, so.
Right,
yeah.
but you're,
It's not the same thing.
but debris
It's not-
spilled on
It
private
doesn't
property.
matter. If the debris came from an airplane, it doesn't mean the town is responsible. The brook is not, the town does not control the brook. I think that's the essence of it. The town does not control the brook.
So the town has zero to say with this brook, nothing. No, they're not required to maintain this brook
I
at
could
all.
tell you this from all the ponds and all the different towns that we worked on.
Right.
If it was private property, we could not spend public funds on private property. That's what it came down to every time. And these were all the lawyers. Because we've had towns, especially Frank Lakes. I happen to live in Frank
Guys,
Lakes.
one person, I'm
And
sorry.
we did,
Hang on, we're having too many conversations. If there's a conversation down there, we have to hold it. If there's a conversation up here, I'm going to ask you guys to hold. So did you guys want something to, anyone have anything to, okay, continue, I'm sorry.
and what happened was, we were doing certain lakes in town. And those lakes were owned by the borough. Okay, a lot of them were fire ponds that the borough of Franklin Lakes had. And we went and a homeowner complained that we did all these lakes and we didn't do this specific lake. So we went back to the mayor and council and said, listen, we did this and this, that these people want this lake done. And then they got the map and they said, this is private. This is owned by these 4 people. This is a private lake. and said, well, they complained that the sediment from the roads went in their pond and all this other stuff. The answer was no, because they couldn't appropriate public funds on private property. And I'm not an attorney. I mean, I have to
I know
defer to
that,
him.
I know that, yeah.
Okay, so,
So even though we also have, I think, 6 or 7 storm drains from the town that drain into our private lake. So do we have the right to now go back to the town and say you have to remove all the storm drains from draining into our private lake? Why is that? Why is that fair?
I don't know what,
You're absolutely right.
I don't know what those lakes are draining. Is it draining your roadways?
Yeah, the roadways
Is
drain.
it roadways for your, where you live?
Well, it's everywhere. It's all, it's.
Does
all
it
the
take
roads.
it outside of the whole lake community?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Just look at the map of all the drain lines.
I mean, there was
Sewer lines.
easements granted for these pipes. I mean, was the lake was built in the 40s, I believe, right?
47.
47, okay. So, I mean, when were those pipes put in? Why were they put in? Were they put in at the time to supply water to the lake? I know in the 80s, that lake was dredged down by Sanzari pretty
Yes.
deep. Because I looked at it actually, probably in the mid to late 2000s with somebody that lived on the lake, about talking about dredging that with the Mosquito Commission, and that was shot down because it was a private community.
Well, the Mosquito Commission did work. I
A
believe,
section of it, of the upper one by the one empty lot.
in the north end.
Right,
They went in and they took out,
right.
they got it down to 8 feet
Yeah.
deep of water.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's not that deep.
Yeah.
So we have probably 8 foot of sediment that has
Yeah.
come down.
I mean, at that time when you had them, you can't even get them to come in there anymore to do anything.
No.
So,
We tried.
but I mean, if you got it that time, it was probably somebody knew somebody to come and, can you help us out with this? And at the time, they were amenable to doing that. But nowadays, what's happening, it's so tough that to dredge these lakes, and then once you have the sediment now, once you're dredging from a lake, that's considered dredge spoils. There's a whole nother category. Now you have to stockpile it, test it, and it has to be removed to a proper facility. It gets very expensive.
Well, we have had looked into what's called hydro raking
Yes.
and hydro raking the material because you don't really need a permit. And then keeping it on our property, just moving it from one portion to the next and then leveling it out. But being that I represent 267 households, you know what's going to happen if I do an assessment on everybody?
Yeah. You won't be representing them anymore.
No. But these council meetings will be packed. And I don't want to see that. I mean, we're just here because we love, our lake. I think it's something we have very special in town. I'm sure everybody would agree that not many towns have this at all, what we have. If you're a lake member or not,
The problem you have is people that don't live on your lake and that are taxpayers. And if they see this money being used, public funds or their money being used, and they don't live on this lake to clean this lake, it's a problem. I've had this happen. I mean, I've been.
I understand that. I understand that. But isn't there, I guess what we're asking is like, we can't fix the problem until the problem is fixed. So if we said, okay, tomorrow we're going to dredge our north end. Well, what's the point of doing it? Because the problem is not solved.
Well,
It's going to keep on coming in and coming in and coming in.
if you were to do that, I would recommend installing a forebay in that area that would catch that
I
material.
brought that up to the mayor about a year ago.
Okay,
yes.
but that would be, again, that would be the lake community.
Right.
And because you have a dam, you have to get that approved by dam safety.
If it's by the dam.
Even if it's not, you have to tell them you're putting a forebay.
I mentioned that to my dam engineer and they were going back and forth a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
With dam safety.
I think with John, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
'Cause I
Mr.
know
Kimmick,
fore-
if at any time you want to speak, just let us know. We'll give you the mic. Okay. It may be helpful.
If it is helpful, I will speak up.
Okay.
So far, so good.
Okay.
so I just have one other question. This work on the brook, who did this?
John, you know. John.
He's looking at the,
Yeah, may I address?
of course.
I
Mike-
believe that was done by, is that the?
John.
Oh, I need a microphone.
Sorry. A second microphone is on our agenda.
I'm usually loud enough that I can pick it up. Is that the Pascack Road?
Yes.
And that's upstream?
If you are on Pascack heading towards Macquarie, it's, if you look down at the brook, it's on the right.
Yes. That was done by the township. Aslina Fury was the engineer at the time. I believe that was done back in the 1980s. Gabion baskets installed because Sue had a file that she made available to me for stream stabilization. I had reviewed that file last week, and I found plans, permits, et cetera, for that work. So I'm taking there was a specific problem there back in the 80s when that was occurring, and the township made the conscious decision to expend funds to fix it.
So, thanks, Mike.
Here, you can use it.
So, Frank, is this something that you're talking about that would have to be done to the banks of the brook? You would never do that. Why?
Mike. Sorry.
That's the worst treatment you can do.
Why is that?
Because first of all, I call them rat baskets. You start getting rodents in them.
Okay.
After a few years, I could show you pictures of stuff like that, ends up eroding, and the baskets fall apart because the metal rusts, and then they start to fall apart, and you have to rebuild them.
So how do you rebuild like that sanitary sewer line?
I do natural boulders.
So you pile boulders all the way?
What I do is I put the boulders down 3 feet plus into the ground, stacked too wide. Then we come up and depending upon the width of the channel, then we step it back. We might do another row of boulders, and then we come back again, and both of those sections are planted. So it's a hard armoring.
So when do you plan on doing all that work?
Soon as we get this all we're putting a proposal together to the township. We've already contacted DEP to get the emergency permit for it. They agreed. And that could happen probably within 4 to 6 months.
And I
And
know
funds are available.
And you need backfill, right?
We need backfill.
We have a lot of it in the north end.
I understand, but I can't take it
Why?
because it's considered dredge material. I don't make up the rules. I just have to follow them.
What's the difference if you're taking it from there or from?
Because I'm taking the
Brook.
shoal out from the stream. That's material that was deposited there from the banks. The stuff into the pond could be mixed with other stuff. That's the state of New Jersey. I know. What you have to do is you have to stockpile the material, let it dry, you put it in a big pile, and there's specific protocol. You test by the number of cubic yards. There's so many tests per cubic yard. It runs about $800 per test. And it's like, I believe the first test is for on the first 1,000 yards, and it's so many yards. I mean, one test per 100 yard, and then every 1,000 yards after that, you have to do another test. So it's composite testing. So you're digging 5 cores to build one sample. And then the problem is the limits are so low for PAHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, are 0.2 parts per million, that a lot of times the stuff just slightly exceeds. Okay, Pennsylvania, it's clean fill, no problem. New Jersey, it's considered dirty. Okay, and that becomes a problem. So now that's where the cost is. The cost is now removing this dredge material. In fact, when you go to dredge your lake, when I go to do the pond, I go to one section of DEP. I go to the land use people. You go to dredge and sediment technology group. It's a different group. So that's what the state has done in the last 5 years. So that's why you see a lot of people. That's why actually the Mosquito Commission got out of the stream cleaning business. It was crazy. First of all, where you stockpile the dirt, where do you get rid of it? Who's going to pay to get rid of it now? What do you do with it? And that's why you see a lot of people, a lot of towns shying away from doing stream cleanings or cleaning their ponds and stuff because it's cost too much money. Before we had the landfill down in Overpeck, and the county would take the material. You could bring it there as landfill cover. Can't do that no more. Now they even make the county has a contractor in there, you have to pay to go dump in there.
All right, so I just want to backtrack here just a little bit.
Go ahead.
So how many trees did you say were approximately down from
I didn't count them, I gotta be honest.
30, 40? Because all of us did,
Maybe more,
there's a ton. We did a walkthrough too
Yeah,
back in
maybe
in
more.
January.
I mean,
So-
there's a ton of them here if you want to count.
So what you're saying is the trees that are down in the brook are not the town's responsibility.
No, I didn't say that. What I said was the town is going to take the trees out. They don't have to. It's not their responsibility to remove them. But in order to keep the water flowing free without diversion and causing more stream damage, we're recommending to them that they appropriate the money and remove it.
Okay, but technically, so let's say
Providing they get signatures from the property owners, allowing them to come on the property to take the material out, to take the trees out.
Right.
Because don't forget, here's the other thing is access is very important, which a lot of people don't understand too. I tell you, I come up to your house, I say, oh yeah, no problem. I'm going to go in the back and get the tree. And then I show up to your house with a track excavator with big wide tracks. And you're going to say, where the hell you think you're going with that? And that happens all the time. And I say, well, in your backyard. And they said, no, you're not. And then what do? And this has happened to me more than a dozen times where we sat there and said, well, listen, if we can't get back there, we can't do nothing. And they said, you're not coming back here. Okay, goodbye. I mean, it's happened.
well, like she was saying before, that like, it's kind of hard to explain, but because it's all being dumped down into the lake. So if I were to walk up that stream and say, okay, issue them a citation, them a citation, them a citation, because all this is ending up in our lake.
But again, that's a legal question, because if the tree fell from an act of God, can you cite the property owner where the tree fell down?
What if the tree fell in the street?
They will cite the property owner. If the tree came down in the storm damage, it took all the wires down. Rockland Electric's not going to hand you a bill. They're going to put the wires back up, cut your tree, push it to the side, put the wires back up, and leave your tree laying there. Happened to me 2 weeks ago.
So who owns the brook?
Hang on. Anthony, do you want to see if there's someone else maybe that has another question? You can pass it around and it'll come back to you.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Who owns the brook?
He has a tax map right there. I mean,
So
right, doesn't it
if
have?
if it's individual homeowners that own that piece of the brook, then
Right.
they need to maintain it. When my wall was falling apart, I rebuilt it at my own expense.
Right.
So why can't every homeowner who lives on the brook, the Lake Association, the lake owners on the lake take care of the waterfront? Why can't they be responsible for everything that falls into the brook and everything that's coming off their property, to clean it up and be responsible for their property? The homeowner association for the townhouses, there's a huge part of the brook that backs onto there. Make them responsible to clean it up and to shore it up. I don't understand what we're afraid of and why the big word is problem instead of solution. It's their property. Does that make sense? That's your answer. So we have no
Any
answer
answers?
to that.
Any answers to her question?
The mayor has no answer, legal has no answer?
I think Frank did say the homeowner is responsible, and if there are violations, they could be reported to the code official, and the code official can go out.
So
That's
it's a
still the answer. I mean, nothing's changed from what he said earlier on. They own the brook.
project.
Right.
But then why can't we do that?
You're asking,
Priority one.
you're asking, basically what you're saying is, you're asking one neighbor to cite another neighbor.
Right, I
So
am. I
then we
clean
have
my
to be
property.
prepared for that. Then as members of the Lake Association or homeowners along the brook, you have to be prepared that your neighbor is watching, prepared to cite you or
So,
report you.
no,
So to sum,
no, the other one.
I'm sorry.
The other one.
so to sum it up, the homeowners are responsible for the trees, but the town is responsible for the bank stabilization. Is that what you were saying earlier?
No. What I'm saying is, let me get this, make it clear.
Okay?
You have an infrastructure, you have a sanitary, I'm sorry. You have an exposed sanitary line.
Right.
That's infrastructure owned by the township. They have an obligation to protect that. Because if that were to breach, you would have a big problem downstream. It would send all that water down to the treatment plant, would cause problems, probably popping manholes and sending sewage into the waterway. Okay, you don't want to do
Okay,
that.
so it's the town's
That's
problem.
their
to fix
obligation
that.
to fix that, correct.
But the stabilization of the banks, who's responsible
Well,
for that?
Individual property owners, that's on private property. If you look on tax maps, you have to see where the property is.
So it's not just the trees, it's also the bank stabilization.
Correct. And it doesn't, let me tell you, the regulations do not preclude any property owner that lives on a brook from getting the appropriate permits and stabilizing that section of their bank. You
So we
can,
should be going after individual property owners that live on that road.
The town has to go.
Right.
The town has
And
to go.
individuals.
Right, Bethany? Right.
So I think you all see where we're kind of going with this, is just trying to find who is responsible. I think now we're kind of getting somewhere. Do all of you have our backs on this as far as, if they're responsible for what is happening to our lake, do you all have our backs on that? That you as a council, do you go after them with everything that we have been presenting to you in my presentation to you 2 years ago? That everything that we spoke about today seems like now it's the responsibility of all the homeowners that back up to the brook.
Council President?
Yeah, you can speak. I'll talk after you.
I mean, I would recommend that obviously it be done in a polite way, maybe a committee.
Of course.
Say, reach out to homeowners along the brook and say, listen, we really need your help. Let's kind of get together as a neighborhood, as a community, outreach. And maybe they don't even know that it's their responsibility. Sometimes you just don't know that that piece of the property is yours. So maybe this is where, neighbor to neighbor, put it out there. Hopefully they're watching. Maybe they didn't even know.
I'm sure they had no idea, but it's extremely unfair for us to keep shelling out. Like this past cleanup was $7,000. Ida cost us $25,000. So
We have to work together as a team, people along the brook, people along the lake. That's
Daisy, you on our team, Daisy?
Listen, I've worked with Councilman Sears on the green team trying to clean up. I know he's
Yeah.
very much active trying to clean up the brook all the time.
Yeah.
So we're certainly not just, I don't want to speak for everybody. We don't want to see the lake falter or people flood. So, Mr. Councilman Sears does a lot to clean it up, and he's got volunteers that go out there and make it happen. But you definitely need more people and bring awareness.
So, I'm sorry.
No,
you
go
done?
ahead.
So I agree too. I think that just correct me if I'm wrong. The people who live on the brook, they also have experienced flooding, correct? A lot of them. They'll come and say they're not part of the lake. Okay, so it behooves everybody to be part of the solution. To maybe there is a lack of knowledge, or who knows if they're even how long they've lived there, if they know what their responsibilities are. So I'm wondering if there's I don't know if there's a way that we can educate, if it's something that we continue to press on if the town takes the responsibility to put signs up, clean up, if a tree falls, it's your property. Maybe we do a mailing to all of the homes around the brook. I'm not sure. I think there may be some kind of knowledge gap as to what they're contributing to the lake. And not everybody watches council meetings. I'm going to be very honest, right? So there's going to be a lot of people who don't even know that this happened tonight. So I think that we may have an opportunity to educate them. How we do that, I'm not 100% sure. I think mailings, or if we were to be doing construction in the area, if we were to buy property and we plan on doing something, we would do let all the homes 200 feet around know, right? Maybe we could do something like that in their mailbox, let them know, just courtesy notice stating, we understand that you are in the Brook area, something along those lines, where we need your help to make sure that you maintain your property. This is, a courtesy. Unfortunately, it will be followed with financial implications if it's not. That's something I think proactively we can do, and it's not a hard and heavy right away, but it is a shot across the bow to say.
Are the homeowners aware that they own part of that?
That's what I think. There may be some. I think there may
A lot of
be.
people figure their property ends right at the stream and that's it.
Right.
So where's that responsibility?
So that's where I think there may be an opportunity to educate some people.
We don't have the authority to impose, okay, yeah, your property is doing this, clean it up. We have no authority to do that.
Right. Right.
Where the town at least has some level of authority.
Right. So
That's where we don't
so
have
I
that
do
power.
I do think that we need to discuss how to get that message out, and if we do it in the same formula that we do whenever we are letting the residents know, kind of how when we acquired property for certain. Yes, you need the mic.
Anthony, did you have a homeowners association meeting? Do you guys meet as a group?
Yeah.
That's a great time to talk. Bring it out. New information. Need to know your
But
responsibilities.
the people on the brook are not part of the association. I am not on the lake at all. There's a bunch of us who are part of the association.
We want to reach out to the Brook people.
That's right. And that's where I'm saying it's not as heavy a lift, I think, as we think it is, because everyone around the lake already knows. It's the people on the brooks that we have to kind of identify, and that's where the town has to help.
Real quick,
Yeah.
there's just
I'm
two
sorry.
things. Sorry.
Yes.
The things that catch all the trash things, whatever they are, like, are we required to have those? Like,
Trash racks
on the Yes.
dam? Absolutely.
like, so, but like, why are we, so we have to clean it up, but if we put another one on the north end, why do we have to clean that?
You're talking about trash racks on the dam, we're required to have them as part of the dam requirements.
Okay, but if we put another one up higher,
You have another one up higher, you want to,
Tony put that picture on, I couldn't see it from over here.
you're talking about putting a boom.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Okay. Again, the boom could be put up
Why are we required to clean up?
because it's your boom for your lake.
None of that stuff's ours. I mean, I just feel like there's something so
It's-
illogical about all this. It's like, hey, the whole county can dump stuff in our lake and that's our responsibility. And it's like, but then we have to have things to catch everyone else's stuff. Why doesn't the town or the people on the brooks required to catch their stuff?
Because you're an on-stream pond. You're going to get this debris coming not only from Washington Township, but towns going
Yeah, and I know.
up to the New York border.
So why don't we have something even on the brook to catch? all the
Because you're
stuff?
not allowed to put a boom on a brook. That's an obstruction to flow.
That'll
That
cause
state
flooding.
prohibits that.
But we're required to have obstruction to flow on our lake. Because that's
You
what the
could
trash
put
is.
you could put a boom on your lake. It's an impoundment of water. When you put the boom on a brook and you're going to block this thing up with trash collecting onto a boom that nobody's going to service, and everybody's going to have their homes flooded. Now that becomes another problem because you got to be careful where you're going to obstruct flow. When you're putting a floating boom in a pond, that boom floats. There's trash is going to go over it. You're going to trap a lot of the floatables. The smaller stuff, the bigger stuff might even break right through and push it right through. I mean, that's happened too in a lot of booms that we put up. I mean, there's turbidity barriers that you could put in that hold it, that we do on a lot of jobs. When we do it on Hudson River and stuff, we put up these turbidity barriers. They're like curtains. They hang up and they go 5 feet down into the water. I mean, the stuff collects behind them. We have to clean it up. I mean, it's look at the Hudson River. The Hudson River has these big pieces of lumber floating in it all the time. The Army Corps of Engineers is out there catching this lumber and picking it up and taking it away. I mean,
Why don't
people.
they just wait for it to go to someone else's property?
Well, they do. A lot of it does. A lot of it comes.
That's literally what I'm saying.
A lot of it comes into the like the Weehawken Yacht Club and stuff, and they have to dredge and maintain it. It's just the way it is when you have an impoundment on a water body. I mean, and that's the unfortunate. It's a beautiful thing to have. Like everybody likes a babbling brook when they get there until the thing roars and it's in their living room. Then it's not so babbling no more. It's not a nice place to live. I mean, it's just the part of being on a lake. I mean, you know.
My last thing
Okay.
would just be to get everyone that, I hope the council will, try to tell the rest of the community to try to meet us halfway here. I know what you're saying, that it's a private thing, so you can't spend taxpayer dollars. I would just ask, long term, as Tony said, they dredged it to 8 feet, whatever it was 20 years ago, now it's at 6 inches. What's it gonna look like when it starts overflowing? You can't afford to do it, and then you're gonna have big problem in the center of your town, and it's just a mud pit, and there's mosquitoes and bugs, and kids go running, they get stuck in the mud, and it's just filthy and gross. And then you come us look at the problem, and we're just gonna tell you, too bad. And I just think long term, someone needs to, meet us halfway, because the end result is gonna affect everyone. If in the
Okay.
middle of the town, it's a giant mud pit. We won't like it, but no one else is gonna like it either.
Okay, I just want to say something. We are hearing everything you're saying, and I think that what we have to do now is start problem solving, right? We have our root cause analysis, for lack of better terms. It's medical for me. We have to look at action items and what comes next. So first, we did the drone study, right? The drone study identified some of these areas of opportunity for us. What I think we need to do, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on the dais, and you can chime in from the seats. I think our next action item, and we need to come up with a time frame, is notify our residents that are around the brook. Let them know what their responsibilities are. As a town, I think we need to set up a resource number, because some are going to have questions and really need some answers and guidance. So I think we're going to have a resource number, almost like a command center sort of setup, where they can ask the questions, how do I clean this? Who do I contact? And that's going to be, I think, collectively, the professionals in town are going to have to know how to guide them and where to tell them to go for the cleanup. Who are the vendors that we use, the tree services that we use, et cetera, costs, all of that. And then I think the third thing is to start enforcing. We have to start doing, have the code enforcer have a specific, goal-focused, every Thursday we go out, that kind of thing. We have to have a plan for monitoring it. And then I think the fourth action item is to monitor and see and reevaluate and see if it's made any impact after we have the storms we know that are coming. That's my suggestion and how I think we need to move forward, but please feel free to offer other solutions.
I just have a quick question, and maybe this is for the engineer. Can you overlay the drone study over the tax maps so that we can see where the problem areas are and what residents that are actually, as a priority, where the down trees are, where the sediment is built up, so that we, if you're putting together a plan and you're going to try to, work with people, maybe we prioritize and have the people who are in those areas, if you can overlay it.
It's a great idea.
And also notify everybody that you are responsible for the brook.
In the book. It's right there.
I mean, I think if you take it in stages and what's the biggest problem, what are the biggest problem areas? Because, I've lived on the lake for, 20, 30 years, and, we've just been cleaning it and cleaning it and cleaning it at our expense. And is there any opportunity for the town or, to assist in some of that cleanup instead of us having to hire people? And I think you mentioned on the other meeting that there's some equipment that the Mosquito Commission would lend people. Is that still a?
Provided you have an operator.
Thank you.
Provided the township has an operator that can run it. It's a long reach track excavator. They have a boat? I don't know. No, I'm talking about just a long reach track excavator. So you have to know how to run it.
I'd like to-
Sure. The mayor wants to, I'm sorry, were you done? Okay.
Yeah, just to address some of the things you said, Desiree, and some things from the audience. I see we can associate the lot and block, I think, with what you've identified with the trees being down. I see us sending 2 notices out to the people who border the brook. One who have trees that are already in the brook, and one who will be a little friendlier and say, hey, do you know this is your responsibility should a tree fall? So I see 2 notices going out depending on the situation.
Great.
The phone number, we'll talk about who those calls should go to. Frank, I have a semi-legal question for you. Should we be looking at our ordinances and coming up with different ones that speak to, like trees in the waterway? Should they be treated differently than just a tree falling on property as opposed to waterway? Because maybe the council needs to either tighten up an ordinance, create a new one to help the code enforcement official when that person goes out.
The state of New Jersey is coming out with a tree ordinance for cutting trees. Maybe what you do is part of the whole stormwater management stuff. Maybe what you do with that is you add a paragraph in there for people living on waterways. And at that point, you spell out in there specifically what the responsibilities are for some people living on waterways. And in that provision, I believe the ordinance you could put a penalty portion in the ordinance that would allow, if they didn't do it, there be monies appropriated through penalties or fines that you could go in then and access that money and go in and have that tree removed.
Okay, yeah, because when the code enforcement officer goes out, I want to make sure he's on solid ground as to what he's enforcing and can point the resident to something specific.
So it's not just the trees, it's also the debris. Right?
Well, I was going to address the debris right now. And Frank, when these trees get removed from the brook,
Where's the mic?
could it potentially make the debris problem worse? Because are some of the trees stopping the debris from going into the lake? And so once the trees are gone, could the debris situation get worse at the lake?
Mayor, that's hard to say.
Okay, that's fine.
I think if you're talking about debris other than woody vegetation, you're not going to stop that. That has to do with garbage cans and dumpsters and stuff up in New York State, that you're going to get floatables and people that throw trash. You're not going to stop that. We're trying. I mean, we've eliminated a lot of it by changing the heads on the inlets where this stuff can't get down there anymore. But I mean, people have a habit still of throwing stuff on the ground. And once you get that storm, that water, all that stuff accumulates, and it's going to go where the water's going.
And again, just to speak for the administration, to piggyback on what you said, Desiree, yes, myself and the council are moving this forward with the drone study. We're here to work to get the problem solved. But as Frank also said, there's a difference between private property and the brook being on other people's private property. We represent all the taxpayers. We have to make sure that anything we're doing represents all of the taxpayers, not just a group on a private lake. And so, we're here to work with everyone to try and get these problems addressed, but we don't have a magic thing that's going to cure it either. So I hope everyone understands that. We want to work, hence we did the drone study. So it's not like we're, burying this in the sand or anything. But, we all have constraints. They're all monetary constraints. And, even the town doesn't have endless money to throw at this. But, so we want to start off with what we have to do, which is the sanitary sewer issue. And like Frank said, it's almost a 1A and 1B, address the trees that are currently in there. Much past that, we'll have to see the cost estimate to do those things and, see if there's an appetite to get them done. What reward will they give the town as a whole? So I hope I've worded that correctly for everyone. We're here to work with you, not against you. I think some people are seeing that you think we're against you and finding the problem to get the problem solved. We're not, but we have constraints just like everyone has constraints in getting things done.
Just the mic for 2 seconds and then.
Can I ask?
Okay, I have another point to make about this. About a week or two ago, after a heavy rain, right after I walked to the post office, and water pouring off our shopping center was ridiculous because it's a flat roof. And I think even Rite Aid was having problems with flooding. And I'm sure, because of the flat roof, I know the supermarket does. Pouring off, like in the middle, like if I'm coming from Food Town to the post office, right in the middle of the shopping center, pouring off, going into the stream. Then right before the stream, there's like some boulders. I'm not sure what to call it. It's like a mesh catching all that water. that should be looked at too. And to me, that's the responsibility of the shopping center. And I know there's a lot of things helping out rain gardens. There's grants for rain gardens. So maybe that's another thing we should be looking into on public land, making rain gardens. And there's something else, I just can't think of the wording for it, but it's a catch-all on public, and also educate people to catch water so you won't get that much streaming water into our gutters, into our sewer drains, catch water, rain barrels. There's a lot we can do, but the town, you have to encourage people to do it. A lot of people, we're suburbs, we do it, but a lot of people don't do stuff like that.
Right. No, that's an excellent idea. It's definitely something we can talk to the grant writer about to see and put it on his radar for, it might already be, I don't know, but we can definitely talk to David.
You were talking about communicating with property owners.
Yes.
Aren't there
Sorry.
existing ordinances that could be applied? I mean, do we have to make up a whole new thing about a lake?
No, I think we were going to add an addendum to specifically
I'm
address
sure
that.
just keeping your property neat and clean.
There's
I'm
enough.
sure there's many
Yeah,
ordinances that
There's
apply.
enough, there's enough now,
That
We
we
were
could
just talking-
cite those as
Yeah,
violations.
We're just talking about amplifying it, but there's plenty in there already.
All right, I think
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councilman Cassio had
Yeah,
something to say.
I just had one quick question for Frank. I was going through the tax maps, and maybe you can explain this to me. There seems to be 3 different types of easements: storm, sanitary, and flood. I understand the sanitary easement. That's not a problem. But there's a storm and a flood. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Stormwater, when you have pipes to convey stormwater with the head walls,
Okay.
where the head walls discharge into the
Yes.
brook.
Okay, so that's the storm, and the
Yes.
flood
Flood,
easement is on the
flood
bank.
is to allow the water to continue to pass through so that even if the resident owns it, he can't block off. He can't say, water's not coming here no more, and build an obstruction across the brook. It
Okay.
has to allow the water to flow.
Okay, because there's actually only 2 properties that have that flood easement on it. So I was just wondering what the difference was between the
It
two.
probably was put in there when they were developing it to make sure that they couldn't block the stream.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm sorry. You had another
I
question?
just have one more and
Uh-huh.
I'll pass it around again. So you're going to ask the homeowners are responsible for the trees, but you're going to ask them to remove the trees and debris once you get to that point. The town is going to be responsible to shore up the banks around just the sanitary sewer lines. Is that right?
Right now, that's the most
That's
pressing.
the priority.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
But that's going to be the town's responsibility to shore up around sanitary sewer lines.
Correct.
Like, that's number one right now. So all the other banks that are eroded behind these people's homes, you're going to ask them about the trees, but isn't it, that's their property that has just fallen off into the water? Are you going to ask them to rebuild their property back to how it was and shore up? This way, all the banks of the river are shored up and we're not.
I'm happy to say Frank is shaking his head no, so maybe he has a better answer than we may
Yeah.
have for you.
Here's another problem that
There's a lot of
happens.
houses up for sale. That's the case.
As the stream continues to erode and people losing property, you hear this all the time. That's my property. It used to be out by that chair. Now it's all the way over here. Okay, the state of New Jersey, when they do studies, they do stream hydraulic analysis. They won't allow you to put that back. So what they want you to do now is when you have a bank that looks vertical like this, they don't want you coming this way. They want you going this way, landward, and lessening the slope to 2-on-1, maximum 2-on-1 slope. So you're looking at something about 45-degree angle like that, maximum. That's so that allows you to continue to plant on that slope, okay, to stabilize it. Because grass is not going to hold. So you put a woody vegetation on there to hold the bank in place. The problem, what we do is when we look at the streams, we take a look at which way the streams are going and how that meander is. And so we'll put hard treatment here, hard treatment down here, some other treatment on this side. And then what we do is we call it bioengineering now. We actually bioengineer banks with streams, with vegetation, with shrubs, trees, and we lessen the slope to a 3-on-1 slope. And then we plant that in, and that holds it. That kind of holds the bank in place. But this is a very long project to do because you can only do so much at a time because of the cost. So when you're getting into that kind of thing, you have to take a global look at the whole reach of the channel. Say, okay, where are we going with this? Because you have bridges in the way, you have head walls coming in. Sometimes what they're asking us to do now, the state, is when you saw those head walls, they look like a V with the pipe in the middle coming out like that to your channel. They're asking us now to back those up 25 feet. So they're no longer in the channel discharging anymore, but now they're back. And then what we do is we put conduit outlet protection. That you see the big stones in front of that. So it slows the water down so you're not getting those erosive forces when the water's coming and taking all the different parking lots and roads. So you're not eroding the stream as much because you're killing the velocity of that water coming in before it makes it to the main waterway. So there's a lot of different things that are being done. The township is responsible for their drainage and head walls. I spoke to the mayor about that. There's some head wall work that has to be done in town, which we'll be doing exactly what I just said. There's the armoring of the infrastructure of that bank that needs to be done because that has to protect the, you don't want to start polluting the stream with having a broken sanitary line. So that's important. Removing the trees will stop the heavy erosion you're getting because everything is eroding around that. The water's trying to make its way around the tree now, and it's causing these wide, expansive stream openings. You don't want that either because now you have these big stream openings. When you have summer months, the water is going to be very shallow and hot and kill any fish that's in there. You start getting algae blooms in your lake because you're sending warm water to the lake.
We see algae a lot.
Right, so you want to keep the streams tight. You want to keep that water flowing, and you want to make sure you have enough water in hot times that it keeps that water cool enough for fish and for macro and microinvertebrates that are in the channel to live. So you want to keep the channel healthy. So that's kind of what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the different steps and get the township to see. Maybe once they take the trees out, you're gonna see a difference. Maybe you won't. Maybe it's coming from up above. We don't know. But until you cure the problem in your own town, you don't know where it's coming from.
Well, I understand your point where you can't have the homeowner rebuild back.
Right.
But asking them to fix their problem, I think, is very important because that's going to now stop the erosion and the sediment from continuing into.
But they would need a permit from the state of New Jersey to do that.
But because it's a homeowner's responsibility.
They would still need a permit from the state of New Jersey to do that.
I understand that, but if that's happening, don't they have to do that? Like if something was happening, let's say on my property, I don't know, the front corner of my property had a sinkhole or something. And,
right.
It was my responsibility to fix it.
But you're talking from a state point of view now? The answer is no.
Well, I guess it's confusing because if you're saying the homeowner is responsible for that, but now they're not allowed to
Right.
They
fix
have
it?
to get a permit.
Okay, so they get the permit.
Right.
But
And they can fix it.
But shouldn't the town have them fix it? Like, you have to fix this. Like you have basically 6 months to fix this problem.
It would be very similar to taking a tree down. I keep going back to that example.
And
Permit to take the tree down.
let's go back to your analogy. What do you think what would happen if you start imposing everybody on the stream to fix it? And they got to lay out anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000.
That's not our problem because that's what we pay to clean up all the debris that comes down. And that's what we're going to pay to clean up all the sediment in North End. You're talking millions.
Right.
So that's not our problem. It's their problem. If they're not maintaining what they should be maintaining, isn't that their issue?
But it's also a regulated water body. They just can't go in and do what they want.
I understand they need permits. So give them the access and tell them what they need. Give them everything. Say, look, here's everything you need. You have 6 months to do it. We don't care what's going to cost you. You have 6 months to do it.
They won't even get a permit in 6 months.
Well, you can't give them a choice. We don't have a choice.
That's why, no, there is a positive message here, and you came up with it. It's not so much imposing or tattling or telling your neighbors, especially if it's led by the council. It's, we're going to help these homeowners save their property. They're losing footage every year. That means their property values go down. So the council is going to help them maintain their property value or increase it by giving them methods through you of how to shore up their banks. They're going to help them by getting somebody who's paid for it. I don't know what Kenneth Pollard does, but somebody to get the state to give permits or whatever else, blanket permits to the town, so that, or there's other, solutions that the council can come up with. We'll work with you either directly or through Anthony. But if you come up with that, so there's saving property and property values, there's decreasing the flooding, which is increasing for everyone. There's homes on my block that are flooded for the first time in 30 years. So you can save a lot of property value, maintain your insurance. There's a lot of ways to spin this positively.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be negative.
That was great.
That was great. That's what we need.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Hi. So in the past, Councilman Sears reported on the tree canopy in this town, throughout the whole town, that I think it's 25% reduction within the past 5 years or something like that. Would you say with the tree reduction, with the tree canopy reduction in this town, meaning, live trees going down, less trees and stuff like that, would you say that that is a reason why a lot more water volume goes into the brook and into the pond?
There's a lot of reasons why more water volume. First of all, we're losing a lot of vegetation. There's a lot of more development coming in that has taken a lot of vegetation out, and you have a lot more buildings. Unfortunately, you have a good proximity to New York. You're not that far away. They don't have the same rules and regulations we have. So there's a lot more water coming. On top of that, you have a lot of change in the way the weather has been reacting, and we're getting these higher intensity storms in shorter periods of time. So that's what's causing a lot of this nuisance flooding, and that's what's exasperating the erosion of the banks, because they're seeing higher velocities than the soil can handle. So once you get out of a slope coming out like this on a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 slope, and now you're starting to do this, all of this material is washing away, and the more it washes, it's coming to do that, and you see the bank undercut, and then all the trees on top of that undercut bank start to go over. But that's what's happening. Now, when you get these obstructions laying in the stream, the water's trying to make its way through, so it's cutting the outer edges of where the tree's laying down. So now the banks are getting even wider yet, and the shoals are developing in the middle. So now you're changing the direction of flow. So yes, the answer.
So you bring up development and stuff like that. This
Yeah.
town has a couple of group developments coming down coming up the road. And there was one recently near the intersection that got turned down. So I just think it needs to be kept in mind to pretty much put the brakes on development.
Well,
for the trees and stuff like that.
Well, let me just explain something else too. With the new regulations that have been coming out over the last 5 years, it's been accounting for that additional development by actually Monday was a new regulation that came out. And what it's making the engineers do now is use the 2100 rainfall data, the year 2100 rainfall data, which makes the basins now a lot bigger and retains a lot more water in anticipation for these storms, these larger storms. On top of that, now, regulations that were promulgated a couple years ago have to do with green infrastructure, rain gardens. I believe somebody over here mentioned rain gardens and bioretention basins. You'll see these basins that are planted with trees and with flowers in them and everything. So they're going more toward what they call green infrastructure. So that's now trapping a lot of that water, taking a lot of that debris, all of that floatable material out and putting it into these basins. On top of that, another ordinance was just recently adopted last year by this council, which makes it even more. Now you have to maintain all of these detention basins, all of these shopping centers, all these commercial developments. They have to maintain their stormwater management devices every year, inspected and/or cleaned. And they have to give it to the DPW, which then gets filed to the state of New Jersey under their stormwater annual permit. So you're going to see some reduction in New Jersey of the floating debris. You're going to see some of that water now being retained more and more as development goes on, because they made it very difficult now with the definition of major development. So now you have to go back to 2004, and if there's impervious coverage or pavement put down, you have to compensate for that pavement back in 2004. So that reduces more runoff coming into the channel. So that's a way the state is now trying to reduce this flooding by imposing this on the stormwater management systems that are being designed by the engineers for these developments coming out. Okay?
I just want to say thank you for doing the drone study. This is really important. Thanks for working with us. And, we're here to work with you guys too. We want you to know that. So moving forward, I guess, who's going to be like my point person to let us know what's going on, what we have to do with the homeowners and.
So I can, or I think if you feel it's more appropriate, the administration have a handle on that. That's up to you.
Let us discuss it in light of this meeting, and we'll get back to you as the point person as to what we decide.
Yeah, because I'd like to know what exactly is going on, and if that's possible for me to know, like, okay, what's going on with all the homeowners.
Everything we do is transparent.
Yeah, and actually, we were talking a little bit of sidebar before. We're going to figure out a way to update the whole town, obviously not just the lake, but the whole town. I think it's important that everybody knows that we are working on a solution to this.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
so for sure, we'll be in touch on a regular basis.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, is there anyone else that would like to come up? Anyone on the council that would like final words?
No, I think we hear them, and we're going to work on it. We'll do what we can.
I think it's an awareness, right? Let's make everybody aware,
Mhm.
not just the rough people.
The whole town should be aware.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any good people here. Most of these lake people are walking on or off of the people aren't here. And, we need to work.
Together, sure.
It's amazing some of the stuff that's been pulled out of the brook during the green team's cleanup, right? Suitcases were pulled out.
So, yeah. So I just, I want to just commend you all. I know you were heavily impacted, firsthand impact, and you could have came in here raging. So I do appreciate the way you've conducted yourself tonight. I think cooler heads prevail, and we can work together for sure. I want to keep the communication open. So please, any of us on the dais, you have all of our numbers. Reach out, text, call, email. The mayor's always available. So we are here to just work with you. This is our town. We want people to want to live here, want to move here. We want to keep your property values up. I personally love this town, and I want others to love it. I never want to feel like we're in a flood zone. So we're all working toward the same goal. So I just appreciate your conduct tonight, and hope you felt that you had the space to really talk about what's going on, and that we heard you and we listened. So if there's nothing more.
One thing, and for full disclosure, I am a lake member, and I believe Miss Morgan is as well. So, even though we don't see the lake, okay, we still get our dues charged. So we understand that there's costs that you incur, okay, and we're very cognizant of that.
Yeah.
But we have to take the town as a whole, and the Lake Association is part of that whole. And we're going to try and do best, and I hope I can speak for everyone in the administration, that we're going to do what's best for everyone. So I want you to be aware of that.
It doesn't
Okay.
get lost on us what you've endured. So we appreciate that.
Desiree, just one final note. We have to be very transparent with all the people in town. However, the engineers do not answer to each individual person.
Right.
They answer to us. So please don't try and stop them and ask them questions in the hall. Please do not try and reach out to them privately through their company. That all goes through the town. So don't put them in an awkward position of trying to ask them questions outside of this meeting. Yeah.
All that really does is make sure that whatever questions you have are followed up and answered, and we're all on the same page. So that's why we ask you to filter it through the administration as well. So we all, we could always follow up on your questions if they're not being answered. Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good night. Thank you.